Okay, today we are doing a little recap of 4.4.1. What did you just learn? You learned about sine and cosine. And I hope you remember that sine kind of looked like that. But can you label the 4 important spots on there, not including the 0, which is pretty obvious? Label those 4 important spots. Try that right now. If you don't remember those 4 important spots, at least know that the period of this thing is 2 pi, and that should help you label one of them. I'll pause for a second while you give that a shot. Okay, so hopefully you knew we would start with 2 pi right here, and then do half of that, and then do half of that. And the only one that's hard to remember for me is that one that's like 3/4 of the way there. And that is 3 pi over 2. Raise your hand if you had those correct. Good, that's the sine graph. Now I'd like you to sketch me the same exact thing. In fact, if you're smart about it, you can just delete this out and leave the numbering the same, but sketch me cosine. Pause while you try that. So the conversations are clearing up here. So how do you do this one? You start at 1 instead of starting at 0. That's the big thing. And if you know that cosine oscillates between between -1 and 1, and you're starting at 1, you know you can only go down after that then, right? So then, how low are you going to go? Well, I like to start and figure out, I'm going to say that's too far down. I should make it about the same distance as this. So, maybe about there. Okay, so then I should make it that low at the middle, and then when it's done, it should be back up to where it was in the first place. It always finishes in the same place it starts for sine and cosine. All right, so now I'm going to just make it go down like this. Turn the corner, it hits right there, and it makes the top right there. There we go. That's cosine. Okay, so those are just plain sine and plain cosine. This one's y equals cosine of x. What if we had thrown in a 7 in front of this? It'd be so easy to change. I would not make you redraw the picture. I would make you relabel it. So instead of having a 1 and a -1 here, we're going to change those to what? 7 and -7. There we go. So those kind are super easy. The amplitude is how high it goes when it makes its swings. Instead of being 1, now it's 7. So the amplitude is now 7. The number in the front here, technically the absolute value of that number, is the amplitude. Okay, next thing. Let's say I threw in a 2 right here. Well, that's going to change a lot of my numbers. Here's why. Because on the inside here, we now have a b. Instead of b being 1 like it was before, the b is 2. That right there is called the b. And this is period equals 2 pi over b. Memorize that formula. And if b is 2, it's 2 pi over 2. Now what you got to think is, my old period was 2 pi. I need to change it to match this. What do I got to do to be 2 pi over 2? I got to multiply, think of it as multiplying. I got to multiply all of my numbers by what? Don't say 2. 1/2. Because if I multiply this by 1/2, I will be the same as if I had divided it. So I'm going to multiply this by 1/2. Multiply this by 1/2. This by 1/2. And then my final answers would be pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and the 2's would cancel, just pi. Do you get how we predicted the period should be pi by getting that? Because the 2's would cancel? All right. I'd like you to try one just like that as your final practice problem. Y equals sine of x, but I'm going to put it over 2. Do you get that's the same exact thing as if I said sine of 1/2 x? Graph either one of those. They're the same thing. Now you got a new period. Make sure you factor that in on your numbering. I'm going to pause for a second while you do that. Okay, let's see how you did. Oh, wait a minute. I haven't had you check with your partner yet. Take the person that I paired you with and see if especially the numbers. I'm sure your sine graphs look the same, but do your numbers look the same? Pause while you do that. Right. Okay, so here's what it should look like. Sine goes like this. Then it's just a matter of how to number it. You normally would number 2 pi, pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2. But in this case, we change them all. Because why? Because the period is 2 pi over b, and the b in this case is 1/2. How do you divide by 1/2 the smart way? You multiply by 2. 2 pi times 2 is the same as divide by 1/2. So if I'm going to have to multiply this by 2, I multiply everything by 2. Final answer, the 2's cancel. This will be pi, this will be 2 pi, this will be 3 pi, and this will be 4 pi. Raise your hand if you had those right. Okay, good. Now you've got an example of a typical, easier question. Sometimes they throw in a couple things. Watch how easy it'd be if they threw in this, a negative and a 2. It's super easy. First of all, this changes to 2 and negative 2. Does that make sense to you? Now, what about the negative? I haven't done the negative yet. I do have to actually flip the graph. This negative in the front here, that means the whole graph needs to get flipped. So it's now going to go down and then up and then up and then back down again. The green one would be your final answer if I change these two things. Okay? The 2 and the negative 2 was just the 2 talking. The negative on it is a flip. Okay, that's everything you need to know, and it's just a review of yesterday. Okay, so today is a work day because a lot of people are gone at that other thing, and I just encourage you to try to finish up your worksheet in class today where you got the teacher here willing to answer your questions. All right, that's all I have for the video for today.